night shift at the empty office building was always eerie, but it paid the bills, and I had grown used to the solitude. I settled into my chair behind the security desk, the dim glow of the monitors providing the only source of light. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder than usual, and the silence was palpable. Little did I know that this night would become a waking nightmare. I began my routine surveillance, scanning the cameras, checking the locked doors, and ensuring everything was in order. But something didn't feel right. A creeping unease settled in my stomach, and I couldn't shake it. The building was supposed to be empty, but an unsettling feeling gnawed at me. That's when I noticed it. A small, white envelope sitting on my desk. My heart raced as I reached for it. How had it appeared without my noticing? With trembling hands, I tore it open, revealing a single piece of paper. The words, "I'm watching you," were scrawled across it in jagged letters. A chill ran down my spine, and I looked around the dimly lit office. It had to be a prank, but the feeling of being observed was too real to ignore. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the surveillance monitors. My heart pounded as I scanned the screens, searching for any sign of movement. Nothing seemed amiss, but the sense of being watched never left me. I couldn't escape the feeling that someone was lurking in the shadows, just out of sight. Hours I dragged on, each one more oppressive than the last. The anxiety that had settled in my chest made it increasingly difficult to focus on my duties. The feeling of being watched grew more intense, and I couldn't shake the notion that a sinister presence was lurking nearby. Then it happened again. Another note appeared, but it was taped to the office window, facing one of the surveillance cameras. My breath caught in my throat as I watched a gloved hand emerge from the darkness, placing the ominous message on the glass. The words were chilling. "You can't hide from me." I was paralyzed by fear. I knew I had to call the police, but the idea of leaving my chair felt impossible. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making, and the fear was suffocating. Who could be tormenting me like this, and what did they want? As I watched the monitors, the sense of being watched intensified. Shadows moved in the corners of the cameras, fleeting figures that appeared and disappeared in the blink of an eye. I knew I couldn't stay in that office any longer. The feeling of being hunted was too real, and I couldn't bear it any longer. With trembling hands, I picked up the phone and dialed 911, begging for help. As I waited for the police to arrive, I couldn't help but glance one last time at the surveillance monitors. In the dim light, I saw a figure standing just outside the office door. It was a person, shrouded in darkness, watching me with evil intent. The police arrived just in time, bursting into the office to find me shaken and terrified. But the figure had vanished, leaving no trace behind. I quit that night, vowing never to return to that office building. The feeling of being watched still haunts me, a chilling reminder that some horrors can never be escaped. I left the building for the last time, my heart pounding and my senses on high alert. But as I walked to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, even in the safety of the outside world. Every shadow seemed like a potential threat, every passing car a potential stalker. The evening shifts at the gas station were always a lonely affair, with the hum of fluorescent lights and the quiet hum of the refrigerators serving as my only companions. Most nights, everything went as expected. Customers would come and go, and the hours would pass without much excitement. But one peculiar occurrence had become a strange routine, and it always unfolded at the stroke of 1 o'clock. Each night, like clockwork, a customer would enter the store at exactly 1 o'clock. It was an odd time for anyone to be out shopping, but this person was consistent. He'd enter the store, fix their gaze on me, and stand there for a few minutes, unblinking. I would feel his eyes, filled with an intense, unsettling focus, piercing through me. I had grown accustomed to this strange ritual, though it never ceased to send shivers down my spine. It wasn't just his presence, it was how he looked at me as if trying to see something deep within my soul. Once the eerie minutes passed, he'd continue shopping, picking up random items and placing them in their basket. The first few times this happened, I chalked it up to eccentric behavior. People had routines and quirks, and this person had his at 1 o'clock in the morning. However, as the nights turned into weeks and months, I couldn't help but wonder about the intentions behind those intense, unwavering stares. One fateful evening, the clock on the wall crept closer to 1 o'clock, and a growing unease settled in my stomach. I found myself glancing at the surveillance camera, my heart racing as I awaited the inevitable arrival of the enigmatic customer. As the door chimed, I watched him enter, his footsteps slow and deliberate, as though every movement was calculated. I couldn't help but lock eyes with him as he approached the counter, his gaze unwavering. For those first few minutes, we stood there in silence, and the tension in the air was almost palpable. I wanted to say something, to break the oppressive atmosphere, but the words remained trapped in my throat. The customer's stare was intense, their eyes like tunnels leading into the depths of my being. At last, he broke the silence, his voice low and filled with an uncanny calmness. "You will be mine forever," he uttered, his lips curling into an unsettling smile. I felt a shiver run down my spine, and an icy sensation spread through my veins. The words hung in the air, heavy with an ominous weight. I struggled to find my voice and finally managed to stammer, "You need to leave. I'm calling the police." The customer's smile widened, but their gaze remained intense. With a low, unsettling chuckle, he turned and walked out of the gas station, the door chiming softly behind him. My relief was palpable, but the feeling of dread still clung to me. From that night on, I couldn't escape the chilling words that had been spoken. Every 1 o'clock that passed filled me with anxiety, knowing that the enigmatic customer might return. The fear had become a constant companion, and I longed for the night when 1 o'clock would come and go without incident. But, against all expectations, the customer never did return. The gas station, once haunted by their presence, began to feel like a place I could breathe freely again. I considered leaving the job behind, finding solace in the idea that the strange chapter of my life was finally over. Weeks turned into months, and I allowed myself to believe that the eerie customer had moved on, their unsettling presence nothing more than a memory. It was a relief, but the weight of their words, "You will be mine forever," continued to haunt my thoughts. I moved on with my life, finding a new job in a different part of town. The gas station became a distant memory, and the fear that had once clung to me began to dissipate. I felt as though I had finally escaped the grasp of an enigmatic and unsettling stranger. The night shift at the hotel started like any other. I arrived at the quiet, dimly lit lobby, ready to settle into my duties. My boss, Mr. Thorne, was there to greet me with a warm smile. At first, he seemed friendly and welcoming, the kind of boss anyone would want. Little did I know that this night would mark the beginning of a nightmare that would shatter my sense of reality. As the nights passed, Mr. Thorne's behavior took a sinister turn. At first, it was subtle. He'd make offhand comments that left me feeling uneasy. One night, as I organized the front desk, he leaned in and whispered, "Do you ever feel like someone's watching you?" The words sent a chill down my spine, and I nervously laughed it off, chalking it up to late-night paranoia. But Mr. Thorne's comments didn't stop there. He dropped cryptic hints about my personal life, things he couldn't possibly know. I became increasingly convinced that he was prying into my affairs. Still, he'd always claimed that it was just a coincidence. The mind games intensified. I'd find random objects moved or misplaced, subtle changes to the hotel's layout, and strange notes left on the front desk. Each note was more unsettling than the last, with phrases like, "I see what you're doing," and "Your secrets aren't safe." One night, while sitting in the office, I received a phone call. The voice on the other end was distorted, but I could tell it was Mr. Thorne. He spoke in riddles, saying things like, "You can't hide forever," and "The game is just beginning." I hung up, shaking with fear, convinced my boss was playing some twisted game with me. The isolation of the night shift became unbearable. I questioned my sanity, wondering if the mind games were a product of sleep deprivation. But the fear that had taken root in my mind was too real to dismiss. Mr. Thorne's constant presence and his uncanny ability to predict my thoughts and actions all contributed to a growing sense of paranoia. One night, I decided to confront him. I couldn't take it anymore. I cornered him in the lobby, my voice shaking as I demanded answers. "What are you doing to me, Mr. Thorne? Why are you playing these games?" He just smiled, a chilling, knowing smile. "I have my reasons," he said cryptically. It's all part of the game. I couldn't take it any longer. I began documenting every strange occurrence, every unsettling note, and every bizarre conversation. I was determined to unravel the mystery behind Mr. Thorne's twisted mind games. One evening, as I reviewed my notes in the office, I noticed a pattern. The strange occurrences were all connected to a specific room in the hotel, room 333. I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. I decided to investigate. I approached room 333 cautiously, the hallway stretching before me in eerie silence. The door was slightly ajar, and I pushed it open, revealing a dark room. As I stepped inside, I was hit by a wave of dread. The room appeared to be empty, but the air was thick with malice. I felt eyes on me, the same feeling I had experienced throughout the mind games. As I flicked the light switch, the room was bathed in a dim, flickering light. And then I saw it. The walls of room 333 were covered in photographs, each featuring me. They were candid shots taken during my shifts, at my apartment, and even in my most private moments. The realization struck me like a blow. Mr. Thorne had been spying on me, documenting my life, and using it as part of his twisted game. The room held more secrets. On a small table, I found a series of journals filled with disturbing ramblings and cryptic writings. It seemed Mr. Thorne had been unraveling his madness on the pages. I was the unwitting protagonist in his deranged narrative. I knew I had to leave the hotel to escape the nightmare that Mr. Thorne had subjected me to. But as I turned to go, a voice echoed in the room, a voice that sent shivers down my spine. "Leaving so soon, my dear?" Mr. Thorne's voice came from behind me. I spun around to find him standing there, his eyes filled with a maniacal gleam. With adrenaline pumping through my veins, I bolted past him, pushing him aside with all the strength I could muster. His maniacal laughter echoed in the hallway as I raced toward the exit. Every step I took was a desperate bid for freedom. I burst out of the hotel, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The night air was cold and refreshing, and I felt liberated. I didn't stop running until I was far from the hotel, and its menacing presence was a mere memory in the distance. As I put distance between myself and that wretched place, I knew I had escaped the clutches of Mr. Thorne and his twisted mind games. I was free from the nightmarish prison he had created, and I had no intention of ever returning.
Thank you for watching. If you want to support our channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe and like button.